Limitless, Episode 9, Headquarters. The synopsis for this episode caught my eye. Brian offers to use NZT to capture the FBI's 10 most wanted criminals in 2 weeks in exchange for Naz giving Brian his own personal work headquarters at the agency. That is one cool plan, and speaking of cool, before we get deep into this NZT experience, I recommend you click the link in the description so you can experience Everlasting Survivors Volume 1 all day long, my 68-page graphic novel. There are limited first printings still available at Etsy.com. This will be the last time that I will be advertising for the Etsy store because this Friday is the relaunch of Everlasting Survivors Volume 1 all day long on Indiegogo. So, the Etsy store first printings will not be available when the Indiegogo relaunches. Back to the show. This show is just chock full of cool, fun stuff, and Brian consistently asking Naz to get his own headquarters and her getting sick of it is nothing but pure fun. Harris, on the fourth day of Brian asking, tries to talk sense into him, saying that, you know this isn't going to get you anywhere. On day 19, Brian pulls the I got you out of prison card to Naz in the elevator, and Naz offers Brian an office, but boring stuff happens in offices and cool stuff happens in headquarters. We get a fun montage of days bleeding into other days and just going back and forth of Naz telling Brian no. On day 25, Brian makes the top 10 list pitch. He says, "It's my first case," with an implied first case that he got to pick. Brian says, "I'm going all in on this." Finch got number 4 on the top 10 while making the pitch to Naz. This show is just so much freaking fun. Perry Granger, number 4, was pen pals with Taurus, a bad guy from a prior episode. 1 down, only 9 to go. Harris is skeptical, doesn't believe just she and Brian can get all of the 10 in 2 weeks, although now it's 9. Brian says, "We need a team. Amazing major crime squad, the Brian Untouchables is what he's calling them." The team doesn't stick around very long when Brian tells them the name that he came up with. Actually, immediately, Boyle, Mike, and Ike walk out on Brian's first team meeting. Boyle's like, "If I don't get a chair, I'm not staying for this thing." Harris and everyone else leave after Boyle, Mike, and Ike leave. On the second try of getting this team together, Brian has better luck, and he plays a homemade movie for the team. It's made of claymation and mixed in with photos, like, a lot like all the other fun, not all, but some of the other fun things that Brian has done with the team. Boyle asks, "Why would we do this? FBI all over are looking for the top 10. Brian retorts, "Because no one ever has gotten a clean sweep, and he knows that his team can do it." Brian and Harris are signing the top 9 out, and a cult recruiter lady has been given to a sad-looking FBI guy. Brian and Rebecca say, "Hang out and look sad," to get recruited. Turns out the dude doesn't even know he looks sad because he asks, "How do I look sad?" And Harris says, "Don't overthink it, just be natural." When Mike and Ike are getting their assignments, Mike is sent to Costa Rica and Ike is sent to Greenland. And Ike is not happy about this development because, his partner in his mind is getting the better end of the deal. Boyle works with Brooks, the guy Casey Brooks, the guy that was revealed that Harris is seeing on the side. They're going after a cop killer. Harris and Finch are after a Ponzi scheme dude. A park ranger has sent Brian a photo, and Brian wants to go to Tanzania with Rebecca to find this guy. Brian and Rebecca offer to move a mob guy up in the rankings for info on another mob guy. It's funny how what is supposed to be a bad thing is a badge of honor to the criminals. After all of the fun top 10 shenanigans, Brian has his family over to the FBI provided apartment. Most are impressed, but his dad seems unimpressed. Brian wants his dad's approval, but it is not happening. NZT Brian is doing math on how many times his dad has personal interactions, and everyone gets good dad time except Brian himself. Brian, I feel your pain. James, that sad-looking FBI guy, video calls Brian the next day. The cult wants him in, and James says some of the ideas make sense. Brian tells him, "We want you to infiltrate them, not join them." With Mike and Ike out, Harris gives Brian his NZT pill for the day. While he is swallowing it, she says, "We got one," and she means we got another one. And so that means 2 down, 8 to go. Brian asks Rebecca, what do Bill Gates, Justin Bieber, Katy Perry, YouTube, and Ellen DeGeneres all have in common? All among the most followed Twitter accounts in the world. Last night, all 5 accounts tweeted out the top 10 and how that they're working on getting them. One of Katy Perry's followers thinks that she found one of the bad guys from the top 10. Brian and Rebecca go to the apartment, but they're being watched via surveillance, and at this point, Brian believes he's found his nemesis, the person who's going to be the anti-Brian. After Brian and Rebecca failed to capture this top tenor that Katy Perry's follower sent them to find, they're back at the office. Mike is calling in, and he's at a clothing optional resort, while Ike calls in from a frozen base. He said he can't even feel his toes. Boyle and Harris's boy toy, Casey, are back at the base, and Boyle finds it humorous that Finch failed to get the prison breakout, wife murdering guy that threw a tweet, because, Boyle is very by the book kind of a guy. After that failed capture, Brian is going a new route, trying to smell out Lawrence Drake, the prison break character, with the shirt that they found at the prior location. While Finch and Harris are working on this sniffing plan, Casey and Boyle are hanging out on a stakeout looking for another top tenor, and Casey Brooks figured it out. He says to Boyle that we just guessed it has to be drugs, because him and his whole crew were talking about it. And if it is a drug, what is stopping the FBI from feeding it to all of us? And Boyle, who knows the truth, he said, if it is a drug, how can we control him in a year? We can barely control him, Brian that is, right now. And speaking of controlling Brian, he is having so much fun with this smelling ability, since he is sniffing out Lawrence Drake, the prison break character. He's being able to see everybody in color, or sense in color, I mean. And he's having a good time with it. While Brian and Rebecca follow the scent to where Drake should be, they get a call from Boyle and Brooks saying that they need help. Brian tells Rebecca she can go to help them, and he imagines what it's going to be like when the 3 of them take down the big bad that they're working with. And Brian goes to find Drake himself. He picks the lock to go in, but when he goes in, he notices that Drake is trying to prove his innocence, that he didn't kill his wife. And when Drake shows up and Brian is doing the research, or going over the research that Drake has, Brian tells Lawrence, "You were meant to be my nemesis, but now I'm like 59% sure you were innocent. What are we going to do about that?" Harris calls Brian, and he says, "Amazing, 3 down." She asks, "Where are you with Lawrence?" He says, "Well, pretty far actually. I found him, and I kind of don't think he killed his wife." And she said, "Are you telling me you're on the lam with Lawrence Drake?" It's just such great writing. As Harris figures out where Brian has taken Drake, which is not hard, he just took him to his apartment, Brian's sister knocks on his door. Rachel comes over to see Brian, but only to get high and watch Game of Thrones. Lawrence has to be second guessing, trusting Brian at this point. Back at the office the next day, Ike is worried that the folks he's hanging out with in Greenland are cannibals. He says, "Who do you think they're going to eat first?" The new guy. Rebecca is listening to Brian. He's being very witty. She says, "Okay, he doesn't sound guilty, but how are you going to prove it?" And then Brian pitches the craziest idea. He wants to give Lawrence Drake NZT. Harris is going to help Brian, but this is a very extreme measure they're taking. When Lawrence takes the chance on Brian's word and Harris, what they say that NZT will do, he pops in the pill and he says, "What kind of snake oil did you give me?" And he says, "Oh mercy." That was his first reaction to having the effect of NZT, and Brian says, "That does the job, huh?" Which, again, is just so much freaking fun. At this point, Lawrence now has a version of himself saying, "Fool, you better quit wasting time." This show is just so much fun. Lawrence being able to use his NZT brain to remember the night of his wife's murder, remembers that the attacker jumped on him as well, and that he felt his face through a ski mask, and he realizes he can sculpt the face with clay, and because Brian's so crafty, he has the clay there to do it with. And we cut to the next day where Harris and Finch take the sculpture to a prison because they found a match to the face that Lawrence Drake sculpted, and the guy confesses to killing Lawrence Drake's wife for a dozen bagels a week because he's serving a double life sentence. And so it's just funny. Naz, back at the FBI, is blown away that the guy confessed to that, and she has to cancel the top 10 hunt because they did so well. Everybody wants in on it. And DC gave Naz a talking to, saying, "You guys are doing something that your department isn't really supposed to do." And they got 8 out of 10 of them, so it's really not bad. With 5 minutes left in the episode, I have the feeling that things are about to turn personal because that's just what this show does. As we finish up for the day at the FBI, a janitor named Stavros comes in and gives the whole team their Bruntouchables t-shirts. So BR from Brian and Untouchables, because that was his mission, was to bring the team together. And back at Brian's place, here it is, the personal thing I was expecting. Brian's dad has come back to his place. He is very serious. Brian's dad kept so many pieces of crafts that Brian made over the years. Not much different than a lot of the crafts that Brian does at the FBI to illustrate his points. And the dad doesn't want any of the stuff anymore because he says that he can't trust his son. His son used to tell him everything, but now he just doesn't like all the lying. So at this point, Brian tells his dad, "It is dangerous if I tell you the truth." His dad says, "I'd suffer for you. I'd die for you." And so Brian looks him dead in the eye and says, "There's a drug. You're right about that. And it is called NZT." We fade to black, and Brian is being honest. I love that Brian went this route, and to me, this is a great 5 out of 5 episode of Limitless. This series is really hitting on all cylinders at this point. And I would like to thank you for tuning into this Wednesday Rewind, this Limitless episode review. Please come back Friday for my update on the Everlasting Survivors Volume 1 All Day Long Indiegogo relaunch. And come back this Monday for an Animation Celebration episode all about All-Star Superman, the movie. And come back next Wednesday as we continue down this Wednesday Rewind with Limitless, the series. Later.